host on FFPC. Relying on ADP sometimes may get you a good team, okay? But I think what it does is it puts you into a certain trap. So if you're drafting into FFPC with the hopes of sort of kind of, winning that first prize, chances are you're going to draft a team that looks like everyone else's, okay? Because your draft slot, say it's the 1 slot, and I've talked about
the
that.
1 trap.
Yeah. You get that number 1 pick, you're excited, you got CMC, be careful you don't fall into that, that number 1 spot trap where you draft CMC and then you go based on ADP drafting, and you draft a wide receiver, and then you draft a wide receiver in round 3, and then round 4 another wide receiver, and then round 5 another wide receiver. Right, so your team looks basically as CMC and 4 straight wide receivers. And even though there may be some
4
variations,
straight yellows.
Even though there may be some variations in the wide receivers, it's basically a very similar team. And then guess what? I'm assuming you're probably going to take a Trey Sermon. Maybe you kind of switch it up and go Mostert,
yeah.
Maybe you get lucky and someone else falls to you. But for the most part, a lot of those teams are going to look very similar, and you potentially could win with that. Based off of kind of how you do in the mid to late rounds. We've talked about how that's probably maybe the more important parts of drafting.
Right.
But I think, especially early on, where ADP has not fully settled to where it's going to settle in September. Don't be afraid to reach. Maybe you don't want to do that in the first early rounds because it just kind of is more common sense or just makes more sense. Maybe there's more of a consensus. But otherwise, don't be afraid to reach. Don't be afraid to sort of kind of say, you know what? I want to do something a little bit different so my team looks a little bit different. Or my team is in need of a tight end. Even though ADP says that I shouldn't take this tight end here, I should wait 2 rounds. That tight end may not be there 2 rounds later.
Right.
Take what your team needs, okay? At the end of your draft, you want to be able to look at your team and say, okay, I can compete. I got a starting lineup. I can compete. And I like to go through everyone else's draft and see, okay, what are they going to be putting out week 1? And then I like to try to figure out, how does my team compare against theirs?
Right.
And I drafted my team, so usually I'm going to say my team compares pretty well. But for the most part, you see a lot of teams that don't really even have a starting lineup draft, starting week 1.
So to clarify a few things, when he was talking about being number 1, so with FFPC, and for people that have never really been in these leagues, first of all, you want to understand that every draft is a league kind of enclosed in itself. It's a 12-team league full of teams that compete from week 1, I want to say, to week 13
now. Yeah, 13 now. Yeah.
And in that, everybody plays each other. I think the top 4 teams, and you can look at the website to see how those top 4 are determined. But those top 4 teams kind of compete to figure out who the winner is of that league, the champion. And I've won. I mean, I'm not bragging or anything, but I've won several championships.
I'll brag for him. He's won a lot.
I won several, but I don't care about those. Okay.
Yeah.
Because like he said,
he doesn't.
You're trying to be the number 1 team. Now, what is the number 1 team? So after this, again, week 13 playoff within your league, the top 2 teams go into this large tournament where all the other top 2 seeds from all the other leagues, and there's hundreds, maybe thousands of leagues.
Thousands.
They all go into one big tournament, and again, they kind of got this formula to figure out how everything's kind of situated. But then out of all those teams, the number 1 person is determined. And this guy right here has won it the last 2 years, so I'm a little jealous of him. So me winning these little league champions, I say little, I mean, I guess it's a significant accomplishment.
It's hard to win a league.
Care. Look,
there are a lot of great players in the FFPC. It is really hard to win a league.
This
right here, come on. Oh, really?
This is what I'm trying to get. All right? I don't care about those league champs. So let me put this back. So when he's saying you're trying to make a team that you can become number 1, what he's basically saying, you're trying to make a team so unique that when you get into that big tournament, compete against all those other teams, your team will kind of stand out from the crowd. Because if you have a team like 20, 30 other teams, then even if you get number 1, you're basically sharing that number 1 prize with 30 other teams. You're sharing the prize almost like the lotto. And you don't want that. You want to be the sole number 1 team. So that number 1 draft slot trap he's talking about is all the teams that have CMAC, or a lot of the teams that have CMAC that we've been seeing, are going to all look similar in the fact they're going to have CMAC. They might have one of 3-4 receivers: DK, Jefferson, Ridley. So all of them.
And so I drafted my first team Memorial Weekend, and he told me, "Listen, the number one team, they get into this trap of getting CMAC and 4 receivers." And I said,
"Watch him go 4 wide receivers."
Yeah,
sure. And I swear in my draft, it was CMAC and 4 receivers going one by one. How many times do you guys see that? And have you drafted that much to where you know where players should go, and it's almost a foregone conclusion?
I'm gonna let you go, but I'm gonna tell you so you don't feel bad.
Yeah.
I only have one CMAC team thus far, and I literally did the same thing.
Yeah,
I couldn't avoid it. Honestly,
and I literally fell into the same trap. And when I fell into the trap, that's when I coined it the trap.
Yeah,
because I felt like there was just like no
there was no other option.
I was like, there was no other option.
Yeah.
I was like, you can hope and try and get lucky that one of those second tiered running backs or third tier, whatever you want to call it. The Antonio Gibson down to the
Najee,
CEH,
the CEH, the Swift.
Yeah, and Swift is maybe not even included in that, given the news. But we'll talk about Swift another time. Swift maybe I think is an excellent value right now. But yeah, so you don't want to reach for maybe a Miles Sanders, knowing that I do multiple drafts and that I can get Miles Sanders at the end of the third. Right. Why do I want to draft in 3-1? Now you can kind of go with the idea that say Miles Sanders breaks out, I had that number 1 pick. How many people are actually reaching for Miles Sanders? That's where it's sort of kind of that,
but that might be a good thing though. That would make your team a little unique.
And I will tell you, some people may be able to win like that, and there are multiple ways you can win. That is not my mode of drafting.
Right.
I think for me, I want the value, so I don't want to reach that far ahead.
Right.
If it's a few picks, I feel like that to me is sort of kind of my limit. Knowing that I'm going to be able to do multiple drafts, I feel like I would rather wait on that end.
But that mindset is literally why the trap occurs.
Yeah.
Because once you get to that point,
it is true.
Literally the only running backs you see that you can choose from is the Swift, like you just said, which is kind of falling off for good reason. Yeah. The Miles Sanders, who was never really even touched
or
the
J.K.
early
Dobbins.
third. Dobbins.
Yeah.
But, some people are warm on Dobbins, some people are not as warm. Yeah. And then you have your do we say CH, Swift?
Yeah, if CEH falls there,
and Miles.
That's automatic lock button if I see CEH fall. And I think early on when I drafted, I think I had a team where I got, what was that team? CMC, it was Joe Mixon, and maybe CEH or Najee Harris.
I don't think it was Najee. I think it was CEH.
Yeah, maybe CEH. So, and again, that's kind of some of the advantages of drafting earlier. Yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire of the Kansas City Chiefs. So yeah, I mean, again, we fall into that trap. That's why we're trying to and it's not. And again, that's not to say don't do it. You may be able to sort of kind of create a team where if you get 4 stud wide receivers, and somehow AJ Brown falls to you, and you get Calvin Ridley, and then you're able to draft 2 other wide receivers. I think I drafted Amari Cooper once, and with one of my CMC teams. Do not do it. Right. Double negative there. Right.
I think the point we're trying to make is understand that it is a trap. Your team is going to look probably similar to other teams, and just be okay with that. Yeah. Or if you're going to be unique, know you're either losing value or you just were lucky enough to have somebody fall to you.
And that's one of the biggest advantages, I think, for me in terms of being able to do multiple drafts and seeing multiple draft boards. We said it last pod. We love to study drafts.
All day long.
We study it like we're getting ready to take a test.
Yeah.
So for us, if you're not someone who drafts a lot, I mean, I would probably recommend, checking out a site like Fantasy Mojo, who I think does a great job of sort of kind of, having available ADP for the FFPC format. But I think that allows you to sort of kind of have a good sense, okay, what's going to be available to me in the 3rd and 4th round before I start my draft.
Right.
So that way, if you're drafting CMC and you see CEH is there, but you may not necessarily be as high on CEH, but you're someone who wants to have a strong running back too, looking at that ADP data, you may be able to look and see, oh man, when it comes to me around 4 or 5, running back is looking kind of slim. And if you're not comfortable with some of the running backs in that area, you may want to, like I said, it's not necessarily reaching, but it's doing what's best for your team at that particular time.
And just a little bit of advice, and we can move on after this, but just a little advice. If you want to try to kind of like you're saying, practice or kind of see what it's like, FFPC offers best balls for like $35.
Correct.
Which is
Yeah.
very, very cheap. And those ADPs actually tend to be very similar to the football guys and main event ADPs. So you can jump in those, just kind of just get a feel of the water, see how people are falling down the boards if you're just kind of trying to kind of get an idea of how ADPs are. But yeah, so definitely if you're not able to see boards.